Welcome to News Hour from the BBC World Service, coming to you live from London. I'm Julian Marshall. In a moment, we'll be discussing whether or not the IOC should ban the entire Russian team from competing in the Rio Olympics. And later in the programme, how Christians and Muslims are being brought together in Lebanon by the Virgin Mary.
If you told my dad 20 years ago that we're going to have a concert about the Virgin Mary with Muslims, he would laugh at me. So this is a wonder. This is a miracle.
And South Sudan's warring politicians urged to work in harmony by the country's top musicians.
We represent the voices of South Sudanese people, crying out, enough is enough.
That's all to come later in this edition of News Hour. It's decision day for the International Olympic Committee. In the next few hours, the IOC is expected to announce whether to exclude the whole Russian team from the Rio Olympics following evidence of widespread and systematic state-sponsored doping. On Thursday, Russia lost an appeal against a ban on its track and field athletes taking part in the Olympics. And earlier this month, when that ban was first announced, one of Russia's top hurdlers, Sergei Shubenkov, told Newshour he wasn't happy with the way Russia had been treated.
Russia has been treated unfairly. Of course, there are facts, there are problems really, and our authorities admit that there are problems that have to be solved. But actually the severeness of the punishments, it's beyond limits to my mind. To my mind, it is the pressure that foreign media has inflicted on us.
Well, joining me now, Lord Moynihan, a former chairman of Britain's Olympic Association, former UK Minister for Sport, and himself an Olympic rowing silver medalist. He was among signatories to a letter to a British newspaper today which said in part, it's time to stand up to cheats and uphold the reputation of the greatest show on earth. Also with me, Gevorg Mirzayan, foreign policy correspondent at Expert magazine in Moscow. Thank you, both of you, for agreeing to speak to us. But before we hear what you have to say, let's just take a quick look at what the Russian media are saying with the BBC's Natalia Golchieva.
Let's start with Sputnik. Sputnik is the Russian government-controlled news agency, and it's published an article under the headline, Rio Olympics won't be the same without Russia. It quotes a French sports newspaper, which allegedly says Russia's absence at the upcoming Rio Olympics will notably affect the world's premier sporting event. RT, which used to be known as Russia Today, is a government-funded television network, and it puts together messages of sympathy for banned Russia from the international sporting community under the headline, in quotes, it's grossly unfair to punish innocent people. The Izvestia newspaper highlights a statement from the Russian President Vladimir Putin. It says there's no place for doping in sport. The newspaper talks about the creation of a new anti-doping committee featuring foreign sports officials under the leadership of Vitaly Smirnov, the recently appointed head of the Russian anti-doping authority. And whatever is today's decision, this is not the end of doping saga, says Radio Liberty, Russian edition. Watch this space.
That was Natalia Golchieva. Lord Moynihan, can I just pick up on one of those points there, that were the entire Russian team to be banned, this would effectively be a collective punishment?
Yes, it would. And it would be because the integrity of the games is damaged where there is evidence that a country practices state-sponsored doping. And the McLaren report, which is the third of report in a row that has focused on Russia, demonstrates that. It's demonstrated very sadly that at a pre-announced visit by investigators, some 8,000 samples stored in a Moscow lab were destroyed. And McLaren went on to talk about the operation of state-directed fail-safe mechanisms, disappearing methodology, loss of samples. I mean, this was coordinated from the very top of sport, and that is tragic for the country. I agree with the comment that just has been made that Rio won't be the same without Russia. But the reality is that, and the findings in the McLaren report make it impossible and indeed wrong for the Russian team or their officials to go to Rio. But, and it's an important but on my behalf, and that is I very much hope to hear from the IOC in the next few hours that those athletes who can prove they are clean to their sports, to their international federations, should be able to participate, but not as part of a Russian team, but under the International Olympic Committee flag and its anthem.
OK, well, we'll pursue that point in a moment. But Gevorg Mrzayan, a response to you. You feel that Russia as a country should not be banned from the Rio Olympics.
Of course, I think that Russia should not be banned, because Olympics are the international sport games. They're without politics. They're outside politics. And what's happening with the Russian team now, it's part of the politics. Of course, there is sport part. I mean,
Mr. Mrzayan, with all due respect, this is a position that Russia always, but this is a position that Russia always falls back on, that this is politics. And yet there is this evidence, incontrovertible evidence of state-sponsored doping.
Thank you for very much for not letting me to continue, but I'll try. So, the first part, of course, it's part of the politics. The second part, of course, it's part of the sport problem and the problem of doping. There was problems with doping in Russian sports, like they are in every other sport, including Great Britain. In the United Kingdom, the sportsmen use doping the same as in Russia. The difference is, the biggest difference, is that the British dopings, like Americans, like French, etc., they are much more sophisticated. So Russia was caught with doping. Russia has to be punished for this. Of course, it has. But to exclude the whole Russian team from such games like the Olympics, it's absolutely unfair. If you want to fight with doping, you must start with WADA. You must start with not only less sophisticated doping procedures like they are in Russia, in China, in other developing countries who doesn't have such a huge and such a strong pharmaceutical industry like the United States and Great Britain are. So you must punish the sportsmen who were caught with doping, but you shouldn't punish the whole country. Because doping is a part of today's sport. OK.
Lord Moynihan, that particular point, everybody's at it nowadays. Is Russia really to be picked on in the way that Mr. Mrzayan feels it has been?
Yes, it is, because sadly, and this is in the words of the McLaren report, the whole basis of the WADA accredited lab operated for the protection of doped Russian athletes. That, positive samples were protected, medal contender quality Russian athletes, that is, who were screened and deleted from the records. There is no evidence that happens in any other country of the world. But Gevorg is right that, of course, doping exists outside, but it's mostly done by individuals. And our country has had no exception in having cases of people who've knowingly taken performance-enhancing substances to cheat fellow athletes out of selection. I introduced legislation only this week that I feel so strongly that those athletes should not only not be selected for the team, but should face criminal sanctions. But this isn't about individual athletes seeking out drugs to enhance their performance. This is a tragic and very, very sad case of state-sponsored doping, right from the top, with evidence from WADA and their reports that it's happened right at the top. And this has meant that thousands of samples have been destroyed at the Moscow lab. And it means that everyone, sadly, is tainted because the doping starts right at the centre. And in those circumstances, my own view is that it is very regrettable, deeply regrettable, but the Russian team simply cannot be accepted to go to Rio under the circumstances which are found in these